Hello everyone, Lance from Permanent Records here. Barely. I slept 3 hours last night, got up and went to the flea market this morning. I'm running on fumes and just kind of feeling a little loopy. I was a little apprehensive about recording a video this morning, but you know what, let's just go for it. It's been a while since I've shown some of the records that have come through the recent arrivals section, and today is the day. I found just a little bit of time before I opened the shop to go through some things, so let's get right into it. The best part about sleep deprivation is it's like free drugs, and I really feel like I'm on one right now, so please bear with me. All right, anyway, before we get rolling here, thank you again for watching. I appreciate you coming back and watching our videos. Thank you very much for subscribing to our channel. The channel is growing pretty quickly, and I'm really proud of that, and we couldn't do that without you. So thank you again. Without further ado, leave a comment, ring the bell, do all the stuff that we have to do on YouTube to, keep the community fun and productive and all that stuff. So in recent arrivals, we have like a mixture of a whole bunch of stuff over here, and I'm looking down at our recent arrivals section here that's filled with about 100 or so used recent arrivals that we put out every day, and that doesn't include anything that's under $8 or $10 or so. So this is the better, or I would say the middle of the road stuff. I'll do another video soon where I go over the majority of the stuff that has ended up on the wall behind me, or is in the section of records that would go on the wall if we had an infinite amount of wall space. So for now, we'll stick with just the stuff that's in the bins, including 2 Japanese imports in this most recent batch of recent arrivals, and in the collection that we bought from the Dan Schwartz estate. There were a ton of Japanese pressings of really great titles. Those 2 are not the best examples. There were way better records than those titles, the Peter Gabriel and the Daryl Hall. But it's always fun to get Japanese pressings with the obi strip and the insert and stuff. It's not the kind of thing you see in the US every day. Also in that recent collection, we had a bunch of box sets. Here's a Lamont Young box set. That's really cool stuff if you're not familiar with Lamont Young, but you're looking to get into modern composition and experimental 21st century classical. That's a great place to start. There's connections to Cale of the Velvet Underground, and he was a part of the New York City Fluxus movement, if I'm not mistaken. Really interesting stuff, really repetitive and droney. Just far out stuff from the late 60s. Speaking of modern composition, we got this Philip Glass Einstein on the Beach box set. That one usually sells really quickly, and we have an anthology of American folk music. This is edited by Harry Smith, and Alan Lomax, if I'm not mistaken, was the curator of this series. Forgive me if I'm wrong on that. Maybe it was just Harry Smith on the anthology of American folk music. I'm feeling a little loopy. Just showing just a handful of the dozens of box sets that are in recent arrivals right now. Speaking of things we have quantity of in the recent arrivals, there are a ton of really interesting, you can't even see me because of how many there are, ethnographic records. These field recordings from faraway places, like this one from Central Africa, are plentiful in the recent arrivals bins and will be for the foreseeable future. The Dan Schwartz collection had a ton of that stuff in it, and that's also the kind of thing that we don't get that often. A bunch more reggae than we usually have. These 2 Prince Far Eye records are just an example of some of the reggae that's going to be hitting the bin soon. That came from a different collection, and I will be making a video about that collection, which is really good too, very soon. United States of America. I talked about this in the Dan Schwartz video, and I just figured I'd show off this cool Jimi Hendrix boot. That's live from the Forum here in Los Angeles from 1970. Not a used record, but you won't find this record used in very readily anywhere. This Survivor All Your Pretty Moves reissue. This is a long overdue reissue done by the fine folks over at Rockadrome. I think Lion, yeah, Lion distributes this title. Anyway, Survivor. This is not Eye of the Tiger Survivor. I think it even says that on the hype sticker. No, it doesn't, but they should have put that on there because you don't want to confuse this with Eye of the Tiger. That's all fine and dandy. This is a very killer. People say killer too much, don't they? I say killer too much. This is a banging hard rock private pressing. And the cool part about this one is that unlike most private pressings, or I guess I should say, this has more of a Thin Lizzy vibe than almost any other American private pressing that I can think of. This band, I believe, was New Jersey or somewhere on the East Coast. Anyway, it came out in 1979, and there are hints of early Judas Priest and UFO and even Zeppelin on here, but I get really, really heavy Thin Lizzy vibes from this thing. I highly recommend checking that one out. All right, hard pivot here. We got this Turtles record. I don't go on and on about Turtles records generally, but I love this Battle of the Bands record. Conceptually, it's amazing. So the Turtles, you know them, you love them, of course. They put together this Battle of the Bands record where they pretend they wrote songs in different styles and even dressed up like the bands that they were pretending to be for this album. And this album is worth owning for that alone, but also because of two tracks in particular. Buzzsaw, well, it does not have the track listing on here, but oh yeah, it does here on the back. Buzzsaw is a really awesome kind of like super fuzzed out surfy instrumental jam. Really, really, really awesome. And the other one is You Showed Me, which I believe De La Soul sampled. I'm sure you would recognize that, and this is where that sample came from. You Showed Me in particular. That's such a great track. It's really vibey, laid back. It's kind of a soft rock thing, but there's more to it than that. Go listen to You Showed Me by the Turtles off of the Battle of the Bands album. Billy Cobham Spectrum, that's such a great record. Speaking of Thin Lizzy, we got the classic Johnny the Fox in the mix. And then we got a rough copy of The Doors' self-titled debut. You'll see on some of our records that we put a Dymo, oh that's the brand of this sticker, on the poly bag, not on the jacket, of course, saying it plays better than it looks. And when we put that sticker on something, that means that we've actually taken the time to play through this particular record to make sure it plays through without any repeating skips or jumps or anything like that. I've, just side note, listened to the Doors' self-titled album probably more than anybody on planet Earth, because this record is so often in rough condition that we have to play almost every copy that ends up in our hands to be sure that it plays through. Of course, we'll go out of our way to buy clean copies when they're presented to us, but we often end up with really rough looking copies, and they sell. We deeply discount them because of the condition, and we guarantee that everything, including these plays better than it looks G+ condition records, will play, or your money back. So Nilsson Schmilsson, I don't know that I need to go on about Harry Nilsson right now. We'll save that for another video. But if you've never heard this album or anything off of this album other than Lime and the Coconut or whatever that song's called, it's just called Coconut. revisit this. This is an amazing album, and Jump Into the Fire will get you moving immediately if you have a pulse. Another just stone cold classic in the mix in the bins. We got the band's music from Big Pink here. Man, I love that album. As you know, the band backed Bob Dylan. They had an illustrious career, a very prolific one as well. And then another hard pivot, here we go into Klaus Nomi. Klaus Nomi was an avant-garde new wave artist. You can see him, I believe he performs with David Bowie on the Saturday Night Live performance. Yeah, just a really, really wacky dude. I believe, I don't remember the background of Klaus Nomi, but he's got at least 2 LPs. Operatic, avant-garde new wave, I guess is how you would categorize that, and it's interesting to say the least. Definitely not for everyone, but neither is Tangerine Dream. But Tangerine Dream are krautrock pioneers, and this is one of their early experimental ambient electronic albums called Alpha Centauri. That's on the Brain record label. This is not an OG green brain, it is an orange brain, but a brain nonetheless. And let's see, let's just rip through some stuff real quick. So everybody knows I'm a hard rock guy, I'm a heavy psych guy, so you know there's always plenty of Jimi Hendrix in the bins over here. This is just a handful of the titles that we have in stock at the moment. I'm sure the bin behind me here is full of even more Jimmy. Peter Green. I've talked about Peter Green, I'm sure, previously. He, if you didn't know this already, was one of the founding members of Fleetwood Mac. That's before Buckingham and Nicks, aka Peter Green era Fleetwood Mac, where the band had a completely different vibe. It's even more different than, say, or Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd versus post Syd Barrett era Pink Floyd. This is a hard and heavy late 60s, early 70s blues rock band. And Peter Green was the guitarist and principal songwriter in this era of Fleetwood Mac. This album, Then Play On, amazing. Then he left the band. Fleetwood Mac went on to Rumors Land, where they hit it big and became much bigger than they could have ever possibly imagined when Peter Green was at the helm. And Peter Green went solo. His solo record, In the Skies, comes very highly recommended. He's an amazing guitarist, and this record is so floaty and vibey and laid back and just soothing, but it's got some, I would not call it ripping, just some incredible guitar work going on here. In the Skies, Peter Green. The US pressing has a different cover. This is like a Dutch or some other European pressing of that album. Another unsung hero of American rock and roll, we got J.J. Cale. Whether you know it or not, you're familiar with J.J. Cale. You've definitely heard After Midnight. J.J. Cale wrote that song that Eric Clapton popularized. And you've probably also heard Call Me the Breeze, which Leonard Skinner popularized. Well, both of those tracks are on this album, Naturally, J.J. Cale's debut album. It's absolutely amazing. Has Drum Machine on it. Just, I can't say enough about how much I love J.J. Cale. And we also have shades in recent arrivals. We have the majority of J.J. Cale's catalog in stock most times. All right, we got David Crosby's If I Could Only Remember My Name. This album is absolutely amazing. If you're only familiar with CSNY, you have to hear this album. Look at that all-star lineup of players on there. Just a stunning, stunning record. This is essentially deeply depressed David Crosby going through a divorce and going into the studio at the encouragement of his friends, his very, very talented friends, and making a really, really amazing album. Also back in the cut, really vibey, really just kind of laid back, but very floaty and just, again, soothing and semi-psychedelic as well. It's absolutely stunning. If you're not familiar with Mama Lion, get familiar. This is Lynn Carey. I wish I could open this and show you what the gatefold's like, or the image is on the inside of the gatefold. She is topless and suckling a baby tiger. No, must be a lion, right? Mama Lion? Duh. Anyway, Lynn Carey, aka Mama Lion, super talented, hard rock female vocalist. Amazing stuff. She worked a lot with Neil Merriweather. Yeah, and her solo albums are really cool too. I highly recommend checking this one out. It's stunning. That's just a reissue, but yeah, it's amazing. We got a little Brian Eno in the mix. Anytime there's a Brian Eno record in the recent arrivals, I'm going to show it off, because Eno, even though he is beloved by everyone who's ever worked at a record store, you can quote me on that, he does not get enough attention. He never will. He's a genius and deserves all the accolades that we could throw his way. This is Taking Tiger Mountain. Obviously, just a classic. And we got Neil Young Zuma. I don't need to say anything about Neil Young Zuma aside from the fact that this is a Stone Cold classic as well. And speaking of Stone Cold classics, we got just a reissue of White Light, White Heat, but classic Velvet Underground second album. All right, moving right along. We're gonna try to keep this under 20 minutes. We got Master Musicians of the Jujuka. That is a really, really interesting ethnographic record. These are guys from Morocco. Yeah, just stunning. I don't know what you call this instrument that they play on here, but it's really hypnotic and really repetitive and just kind of like wildly psychedelic in an indigenous kind of way. Television's second album. Everybody talks about Marquee Moon, and that's a classic. I adore Marquee Moon. I think it's one of the greatest albums of all time, regardless of genre. But Adventure kind of gets swept under the rug and overlooked, and that's a damn shame, because this is a really great follow-up. It just doesn't quite reach the heights of Marquee Moon, but it has some moments on it. My favorite track on here is called The Fire. I was surprised to see that Days, the second track on this album, was included on Television's top 5 on Spotify, just because I would have figured it would be all Marquee Moon tracks, but that's how you know Adventure is worth your attention. Here's a classic Impulse title. This is Charlie Hayden's Liberation Music Orchestra on, I think I already said Impulse, like I said. Not a lot of sleep, y'all. This is a really cool album. You should definitely check it out. It's kind of, I don't know, Baroque. Almost has like a twisted circus kind of feel to it, but it's interesting, and the players are just, you know, undeniable. You got arrangements by Carla Bley, Gato Barbieri, Don Cherry, Dewey Redman, Roswell Rudd, and Sam Brown all play on this with Charlie Hayden. And fun side note, fun fact, Charlie Hayden is Petra Hayden's father, and Petra Hayden is in That Dog and, oh, I'm spacing, oh my gosh. Anyway, Petra Hayden, Charlie Hayden. Why can't I think of it? Doesn't matter. Anyway, Plastic Bertrand, French or Belgian? He sings in French. Punk, new wave. Ça plaint pour moi, Plastic Bertrand. Super, super catchy stuff. Anytime we find these in Europe, we pick them up and bring them home, because you just don't see Plastic Bertrand records in the States very often. Here's another one that you don't see in the States very often, Relics by Pink Floyd. This is technically an early, like, greatest hits compilation, but it also has, and it's one of the few places you can find the Nile song on vinyl outside of the exceptionally expensive original 45, and that song is insane. You have to go listen to the Nile song ASAP. Here we go. more and more and more and more and more and more and more ethnographic records. I told you at the beginning of this video we had a ton of that kind of stuff, and there's just more and more of it as we go through recent arrivals. We have some more modern composition, 21st century classic, 21st century classical. There you go. The Runaways self-titled debut, one of the greatest all-female rock bands of all time. Billy Joe Shaver, we got some outlaw country there. If you've never seen Heartworn Highways, please go watch that documentary immediately. It's awesome. We got a foreign pressing of Nevermind the Bollocks by the Sex Pistols. We got an amazing Joe Henderson album on Milestone. Another Joe Henderson. I gotta go quick here, y'all, because I gotta open the shop. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. There you go. Tropicalia Classic, Caetano Velosa, Raka Azul. Please forgive me if I mispronounce that. I do not speak Portuguese or Spanish for that matter. I know, I need to. I'll figure it out one of these days when I find more than 3 hours to sleep. Flood by They Might Be Giants. We have 2 copies of this in recent arrivals. That one is getting harder and harder to come by. Here's another copy of the Doors self-titled album that I had to listen to last week. This, like most Numero Group compilations, is an amazing album. This is the Eccentric Funk, compiling rare, you guessed it, funk tracks in typical Numero fashion. An amazing curation. And a bunch of Talking Heads records. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll be back soon with another one because the records just keep on coming. No, that's a good thing. I'll see you soon.